Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. We're discussing that rampage in Norway and the shock that's felt not just in that Scandinavian country, but across Europe, sparking the debate of whether it was an isolated act or a sign of growing intolerance. We heard differing views in part one. We heard from the spokesperson for the Progress Party, which Anders Behring Breivik had left, Martin Høglund. A little bit later on, we hope to hear from Norway's foreign minister. He hails from the ruling Labour Party. With us from the Norwegian capital, attorney Bente Oftedal Rolli. Here in Paris, Victor Vidi of the French Socialist Party. And from Brussels, Leigh Phillips, reporter for the EU Observer and EUobserver.com. Before the break, we were Bente Oftedal Rolli pointing out that there are poor people in Norway. Victor Vidi mentioning how there seems to be a bit of a credibility gap, shall we say, for center-left and center-right parties in Europe, and those parties on the fringes who are growing in popularity. A bit later on, we'll show you a chart on that subject. What we can tell you, though, is this Tuesday's Wall Street Journal, with a lead editorial in which it says that Norway's murders shouldn't be an excuse to shut down a debate over multiculturalism and the failure of many Muslims to assimilate to Europe's cultural norms. British Prime Minister David Cameron and French President Nicolas Sarkozy have broken taboos by speaking sensibly on the subject. Victor Vidi, why are you shaking your head?
Don't you think it's funny that you have right-wing parties that are right now breaking taboos, and so that they freed some extremist speeches, so now those people do believe that it's normal to reject multiculturalism. It's normal not to accept people that are different, and I think it's really important what is happening right now. And you had the rise of far right, and now right-wing parties, some right-wing parties in Europe are thinking we should maybe try to get our speech close to what they are saying. And it's really important that right now right-wing parties, and be sure they don't want to discuss on these issues. They are not here today, and they won't be discussing the Norwegian issues on TV. They won't do that because they know that what they are doing right now is damaging Europe, is damaging our countries, but it's the only way for them to get to still be in power.
But you say that. However, let me just ask you the question. Why not to have a debate over multiculturalism? Do you understand when, for instance, people who suddenly see people from a different race, a different religion, that they're suddenly maybe a bit nervous if they've lived all their life and they haven't seen these people in their village? They feel like their world is changing.
If you have someone alone, a regular Norwegian guy, killing regular Norwegian young people, and it's still the fault of other people, it's really unbelievable. Of course, we always need to discuss how to ensure that we ensure democracy, peace, and the development of the welfare state of the European Union. That's a real issue. But at the moment,
but it is delicate talking about issues such as multiculturalism, such as what is national identity.
The thing is, do we offer a social contract to those people, or do we say you are enemies and we will close our doors when you have problems? How can you ensure that you accept people? Then you can easily discuss this issue. When you have a crisis in Tunisia, we decide to close our gates in France, even though it created a crisis with Italy. It's the way right-wing parties are dealing these issues in Europe is a real danger for democracy, because we are putting people against each other, stating that it's other people's fault, while we should put all those people around the table and say, okay, what is a social contract? How do we ensure to develop our system, our welfare state, and as well as our economy? Because at the moment, we are closing our doors, we are shutting down our economy, and I really don't see what is improvement of in the way politics is done in Europe.
Leigh Phillips, let me put it to you now. When you have Angela Merkel in Germany or Nicolas Sarkozy in France raising these issues about multiculturalism, about identity. Is that, as Victor Vidi said, a danger for democracy, or is that just democracy in action? That's maybe what the voters want.
I think it really is. I want to stress that you're really looking at the wrong, wrong response here. The discourse of people like Angela Merkel, Thilo Sarrazin, the German central bank official who made some comments along the similar line. So this spreads to the center left as well as the center right. They are aping the language and discourse. It may be toned down a little bit, but it's aping the discourse of the far right, and you're looking for reason to this discourse when in fact we know it's a very simple political calculation that as economic dislocation increases, these sorts of extremist ideas begin to flourish. Before you were talking about how the Northern League began to rise long before the economic crisis. But we have to realize is that there's been this growing economic dislocation for about 30 years in much of Europe with deindustrialization, layoffs, cuts to the welfare state. This is the thing. This is the background to all of this. And then suddenly, in 2008, 2009, it gets a lot worse. And now we're bearing the fruit of that. And so the solution to this is not going to come from just feeding more of the discourse about multiculturalism, but it's a political question about really solving the issues of poverty, economic dislocation, and taking care of the people who feel like they've lost out as Europe is deindustrialized.
Now, we can look at some statistics now, courtesy of the Pew Research Center, that show the rise of the Muslim population. First, perhaps we can look at the chart from Scandinavia, where you can see that from 1990, most countries it doubles every 20 years. And when you look at the rest of Europe, it's a similar story. Especially take a look, for instance, at the UK, where currently it's estimated that it's under 5% of the population's Muslim, and that's going to nearly double by 2030. Bente Oftedal-Rolly, question for you. You work with asylum seekers. A lot of those are hail. You were telling me before the show from places like Somalia, like Afghanistan. Is it difficult for Norwegians as they age and more people come from countries that are so different culturally? Is it difficult for Norwegians to assimilate these people?
Seriously, it is not. Honestly and seriously, it is not. What is the huge problem is the propaganda you get in the newspapers or in the media from politicians that want to make politics on some easy solutions of things. And they want the scandals that these people are often the ones that are presented as the criminals, as the lazy ones, the the people that you can't integrate, and that is not the reality. If you can see all over Norway, when some of their own refugees, who they know, have got a negative answer and they are to be sent out, the villages stand up for them. It's a lot of really good acceptance of these people here. But it is a fact that what is presented generally in newspapers, most of all, is what is the scandal. And then comes the rapist. Then they do not publish anything about the rest of these people. So they make a link between a boy from Afghanistan, from Iraq, or from Somalia, when something bad is done.
We have with us Bente.
But Norwegians generally do accept them. There is not a huge problem around in Norway, not even in Oslo.
All right, we have with us now the Norwegian Foreign Minister, Jonas Gahr Støre. Thank you for joining us here in the France 24 debate. You've been listening to a bit of the conversation there that we've been having. And I'm going to go back to the question that we posed at the outset. Is it a lone gunman, or did perhaps Norway fail to pick up on certain warning signs of growing intolerance?
You know, as a point of departure, I am foreign minister, I'm not police, and I think we are wise not to mix those roles. Our responsibility as a government is to make Norway function now after this disaster, and that is functioning. Down the street here, the government building has been blown out, but those ministries are now in new buildings and can run their responsibilities. The police will have to conclude their investigation, but what we know thus far is that this is one person, and I would say one madman's work, planified over many years, and I think we will need a debate on how that can happen. But as far as I've heard from the intelligence services, that they had no indication. And if you pose the question this way, we don't want a society where every Norwegian is being, followed and tracked for opinions. And this happened, and we will have to find out how it could happen. And in the meantime, we have to mourn, and we have to take care of those who need the unity and togetherness of these people.
Is your way of life in Norway going to change the way it changed in places like New York City after 9/11?
I mean, we will never be the same after this disaster, which was the biggest attack on Norway since World War II. But I think we have pledged, under the leadership of the Prime Minister, a very solemn desire to have a recognizable Norway. You're not going to see streets closed off. You're not going to see youth gatherings at locked up places. We don't want to have it that way. And I think it's a very serious resolve among Norwegians that we will stand up for that. So one madman's work is not going to change what millions prefer as their way of life.
But is there nonetheless this issue that perhaps there was a certain where politicians perhaps were too quick in the past to rise to the bait and fuel the flames of intolerance?
I mean, that is, in an open society with an intensive debate, something we always have to watch carefully. Norway has changed quite significantly over the last 30, 40 years. But it's not a specifically Norwegian phenomenon. We are now becoming more like other European countries. This is a global phenomenon that we are living through. It's a European reality. In fact, integration in my country has gone a lot better than in many other countries. If you look at statistics, participation in the labor market, education participation, cultural participation, and so forth. But yes, it is a challenge. We are more diverse. From something which was very unitary, we are now more diverse, which can also be a strength. This is not a multicultural country. This is Norway based on a common foundation of rights and obligations for everyone, no matter where you come from. And then we have to learn as a society to live with greater diversity. For some, that's a challenge, but for most of us, I think it is a reality that we also accept.
Bente Oftedal Rolli was making the point a short while ago that there are a lot of people, nonetheless, who are excluded from the system. How do you explain the fact that the Progress Party, for instance, polled 22% last time round?
Well, I'm in politics to combat that party. I profoundly disagree with them, but I respect that they are part of our democracy. I don't find them on that extreme right as we see in most other countries in Europe. But they are the main opposition to my sincere beliefs. But I will fight them by ballots and not bullets. I'll fight them in parliament and I'll fight them in elections, and I have a sincere conviction that I will win. The strength of democracy is still that we can pick up the currents of people, the thoughts of people, the fears of people through democratic channels, and we have to see to it that the freedom expression means that everybody can, voice their fear, voice their aspirations. The danger in society is if groups are locked out, where they are not heard, not seen, and then they can start to toy with extremist views. That is an ongoing challenge, I think, for all countries that want to be open and pluralistic.
All right, Victor Vidi, I just want you to react to what the foreign minister just said. You were mentioning earlier how perhaps social democratic center-right parties haven't come to terms with how do you keep people from feeling excluded from the debate.
Well, I couldn't agree more with what you just said, and I really would enjoy having that kind of government in my country. But I do believe that, especially in France, and especially with the way the European Union issue is well dealt with in our countries, we really need to ensure that politics get closer to the people. Today, when you're in France, when you're in any other European country, you see politics as a game that is far to the people, and any alternative would not change anything for you. And I really do believe that right now in France, what the socialists need to do is to show the people with our primaries, but also during the election, that when we'll get in power, we will really change things, and we will ask people what they want, and we will ensure that democracy is not just a word, but it's a reality in our country, and we really need it.
All right. Jonas Gahr Støre, I just wanted to ask you just a quick question here about the British newspapers saying that you were saying at the outset how you're not the police, but the British newspapers saying how there was perhaps a lead in the UK. Do you think that he acted very much alone at this point?
You know, I just have to repeat what I said. I am not the police, and I'm not going to go into that investigation. I will follow that through other channels. You know, from a few years ago, when the disaster struck another European country, the government pointed finger in one direction and drew conclusions. It turned out that the responsible was in another direction. So we will take great care not to mix those roles. It seems thus far, as what we hear from the police, that this is the work of one person. Then you can question, can one person be totally responsible for such a gruesome act? I will not pose any judgment on that now. I think we will have a response from solid police work, which is now in the way.
And just brief us, just a final word before we go. The atmosphere in Oslo, we can see all the flowers there behind you. I guess today was not a normal working day, just by looking at the scene where you are. When do you think life will begin to return to normal?
Life is returning to Norway, to normal. You know, Norwegians are not going to let this change normality that they cherish. But in the midst of normality, in the midst of summer vacation, you see this. And this is Oslo. I was yesterday in a small town in the south of Norway. Same thing. Center, square, flowers, people coming together. And that is, I think, it's the strength of a small country, that we come together when something like this strikes, across party lines, across religions, across any ethnic backgrounds. But I think one way we can show that we're not going to go threatened by this madman's work is that we will gradually return to normality. But these are not normal times, and that's why we have to stop and spend time with those who have been hit, those who are now coming back to their municipalities all over Norway with terrible memories, those who don't come back, and we have to stick with their families. And then I think we really will pay tribute, especially to those young people, but also to those who worked in the ministries, that we will go back to normal work. We will have our summer vacation, and Norway will be recognizable also after this.
All right, Jonas Gahr Støre, our viewers' thoughts are with you. Our thoughts are with you as well. Our thoughts are with Bente Oftedal Rolli as well in Oslo, and we want to thank you both for joining us from the Norwegian capital. We want to also thank Leif Phillips for being with us from Brussels, and you, Victor Vidi, for joining us here in the studio. And thank you for being with us for the France 24 debate.